So today we're going to look at a spring flowering genus of plants which come from Australia, and these are the acacias or the wattles. And coming from Australia, you might well think that they're too tender to grow in our gardens, but as I'm going to show you pictures of 4 species, I can assure you that they're not. And providing you grow them out of a frost pocket and somewhere where they've got a fair amount of shelter from the wind, you too can grow these lovely plants for yourselves. And the first one we're looking at is Acacia baileyana, the Cootmunda wattle, and there are various forms of this. The older leaves are this exquisite blue, and the new growth is slightly tinged, a darker reddish colour. There is a form called baileyana purpurea, which has new growth that is much more pronounced purple. Now we've just missed the flowers here. They were out in very early March, and you can see where the flower spikes were. You can also see that this is a tree which you might have perhaps started off in your greenhouse, but anywhere in the milder parts of the country you can grow it outside and it'll make a small tree. And only a week or two ago, travelling down to the nursery at Burncoose, I stopped and photographed one of these growing out of a hedge in someone's garden, and it was at least 30 foot tall and absolutely covered in yellow pom-pom flowers. We've missed it for this year, but we won't have missed it in some of the others we're going to look at. So this is Acacia baileyana, the Cootmunda wattle. So here's another species of acacia which was only planted a few weeks ago, and this is Acacia pravissima, and it's again, we've missed the flowering which took place a week or two ago. It has these very distinct pointed leaves. It's quite unmistakable as a species, and its common name is the Ovens wattle. We used to have a large plant growing here which got up to about 15 feet, but sadly it blew over in a strong westerly gale. So we must expect this plant also to grow up as a large shrub or a small tree. We need to give it a bit more space than you might expect, because it's a big shrub, it's a big thing. And again, when it flowers, the contrast between the yellow of its flowers and these delicate pointed bluish leaves is really quite something. So now we've got something a bit more substantial to look at and actually out in flower. And this is the Acacia cultriformis, otherwise known as the knife leaf wattle, and you can see what we mean by a knife leaf. And look at these amazing fluffy yellow flowers produced on last year's new growth, which actually completely cover the tree. And there's a fairly gentle but nice scent with the flowers as well. But what we're looking at here is actually a substantial tree, and it's grown this tall in about 15 years, and we've had 1 or 2 breakages where branches have split off in the wind, and we've pruned it a little bit to uplift the crown of the tree. But when you stand back, you can see that it's a spreading tree, and an extremely pretty one when viewed from a distance. Cultriformis is not a particularly well-known acacia in the UK, and our plant was originally given to us by a friend from Anthony House, and it's growing actually in the teeth of the east wind, so it's much tougher than might be expected. And looking at it from above, it's really quite a sight in the garden today, and we're looking at it in the last few days of March. The other 2 species we looked at would have been out and over by now, but cultriformis is absolutely at its best today. So this is the biggest acacia species that we've got growing here, and it's a monster. This is Acacia melanoxylon. It's a bit of a mouthful to pronounce, and it's very similar in its leaf form to the rather better known Acacia dealbata, and it may well be a subspecies of it. Its common name is the blackwood, and if we just go round and look at the trunk of this tree, we really are talking about Acacia melanoxylon as a tree. The bark's really rather beautiful as it fissures and splits up and down the trunk. And this tree has been in the ground maybe about 35 years, and it's certainly 40 feet tall today. In southern Ireland you find this growing wild in very high rainfall areas on the west coast and on the islands just off the west coast of Ireland, where it grows into a gigantic tree as big as any beech tree or chestnut you could think of, and there they grow in groves and self-sow themselves. Here in Cornwall they're a little more modest, but don't expect when you grow this acacia anything other than it to turn into a tree. But let's just have a look at the flowers. As we stand back, well back from the tree, the tree is absolutely plastered in little fluffy wattles. So the blackwood's got wattles, as they say, and right up to the top of the tree, and again in the full teeth of the east wind, this tree is surviving fantastically well. Would almost make a windbreak in a coastal area. A very fine tree, but one you need room to grow. Yet again proving that acacias are much hardier than you might expect, and they're beautiful in the greenhouse for a year or two before they get too big, but they're much better out in the garden in milder parts of the country.